Malaysia's rise. Why the world is quietly taking notice. What if I told you that one of the most important economic stories of the 2020s is happening right now and the mainstream media is almost completely ignoring it? Not in China. Not in India. Not in the United States. In Malaysia. A country of 33 million people tucked into the heart of Southeast Asia is quietly, methodically, and almost invisibly transforming itself into one of the most consequential economies on the planet. And by the time the world catches up, the opportunity will already be gone. But wait, before we begin, please subscribe to ensure that you never miss out on any of my essential stuff. Comment "I subscribe" below, and I will personally welcome you to our community. With that said, let's get started. Let's be real for a second. When most people think about economic powerhouses, their minds go to China, or America, maybe South Korea or Germany. Malaysia? It's not usually in that conversation. And that is exactly why this story is so powerful, because the world isn't watching. But it absolutely should be. In 2023 alone, Malaysia's economy grew by 5.9%. To put that in context, Germany's economy shrank. France barely moved. And the United Kingdom was fighting off a recession. But Malaysia? Malaysia was building. So today, we're going to break down exactly why the world is quietly taking notice of Malaysia. We're counting down from the least known fact to the most jaw-dropping reality. And trust me, by the end of this video, you will never look at this country the same way again. Let's start where almost no one starts. Let's start with a chip. Not a potato chip. A semiconductor chip. The tiny, almost invisible piece of technology that powers your phone, your car, your laptop, your hospital equipment, and frankly, the entire modern world. Here's a fact that will stop you cold. Over 13% of the world's semiconductors pass through Malaysia. 13%. That means more than 1 in every 8 chips on the planet at some point touches Malaysian soil, Malaysian hands, Malaysian facilities. The World Semiconductor Trade Statistics report from 2023 revealed that Malaysia's semiconductor exports had reached $100 billion, a staggering 47% increase over just 5 years. 5 years. And here's the part that should make every supply chain manager, every tech CEO, and every government official genuinely nervous. If a major disruption, a flood, a political crisis, a pandemic hit Malaysia's semiconductor corridor right now, factories from Texas to Tokyo would grind to a halt within weeks. That is not hypothetical. That is the reality of how deeply embedded Malaysia is in the global tech supply chain. And let me tell you about a man who lived this transformation firsthand. Ahmad is 58 years old. He grew up in Penang, the son of a rubber tapper. His father's hands were permanently stained from decades of latex work under the brutal Malaysian sun. Ahmad had no reason to expect a different life. He studied hard, but opportunities were thin. For most of his 30s, he worked odd jobs around the Bayan Lapis industrial zone. Then Intel expanded. Then Motorola. Then a wave of semiconductor giants arrived in Penang, and Ahmad found himself almost by accident trained as a cleanroom technician. Today, he manages a facility that manufactures components shipped to devices used in over 40 countries. I used to think Malaysia was just rubber and palm oil, he told an interviewer last year. Now I'm making parts that go into satellites. That is Malaysia's first transformation. But it's not the most exciting one. Because here's what's happening with the money. You have probably heard about the great investment exodus from China. Rising labor costs, regulatory uncertainty, geopolitical tension with the West. Billions of dollars of foreign investment that used to flow into Chinese factories is now looking for a new home. And investors from America, Europe, Japan, and South Korea have all quietly arrived at the same answer: Malaysia. In 2023, Malaysia's Investment Development Authority (MIDA) reported that approved investments hit RM329.5 billion. That is a record. That is a 22% jump from 2022. And that number is not slowing down. Think about what that means on the ground. In Kuala Lumpur's tech district, construction cranes are permanent fixtures on the skyline. New data centers. New logistics hubs. New regional headquarters for companies you use every single day. Sarah Chin is 34. She founded a fintech startup in KL 6 years ago, back when the ecosystem was small and scrappy. She told us that in 2021, she could count the number of international investors in her neighborhood on one hand. By late 2023, she had watched 3 separate Silicon Valley firms open offices on her street alone. "It doesn't feel like Southeast Asia anymore," she said. "It feels like a tech city that happens to be in Southeast Asia." But why Malaysia specifically? What does this country have that others don't? The answer comes down to 3 things: English-speaking, educated workforce, political and legal stability, and geographic location that puts you within a 6-hour flight of half the world's population. That combination? Almost impossible to replicate. And right now, Malaysia is the only country in the region that checks all 3 boxes convincingly. But here's where it gets really interesting. There is a strip of land at the southern tip of Malaysia, just across a narrow strait from Singapore, that has quietly become one of the most strategically valuable pieces of real estate on Earth. Its name is Johor Bahru. And what is happening there right now is almost surreal. In 2024, Malaysia and Singapore jointly announced the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone, the JSSEZ. This isn't just a trade deal or a tax break scheme. This is a fully integrated economic corridor designed to combine Malaysia's land, resources, and labor with Singapore's capital, financial infrastructure, and global connectivity. According to projections by Pemandu Associates in 2024, this zone is expected to generate over $26 billion in economic activity by 2030. And the companies already signing up suggest that projection may actually be conservative. Now let me tell you about Insik Razif. He's 61. He grew up in a kampung, a traditional village, on the outskirts of Johor Bahru. His family had owned the same land for 3 generations. In 2019, a property developer came knocking with a buyout offer. It felt too low, too uncertain. Razif said no. His neighbors thought he was making a mistake. Then the SEZ announcement came. The high-speed rail discussions reopened. International companies started arriving. By 2023, the offers coming to Razif were almost unrecognizable compared to what he'd been offered 4 years earlier. He still hasn't sold, because he's not sure the land will ever stop growing in value. And the most remarkable part? Singapore didn't just agree to the JSSEZ. Singapore pushed for it. The city-state, one of the wealthiest per capita economies in the world, looked at its neighbor and said, "We need this partnership." That is how much Malaysia's positioning has changed. Now, behind all of this economic momentum, there's a political story that almost nobody outside Southeast Asia fully understands. Because just 2 years ago, analysts were warning that Malaysia was teetering on the edge of political dysfunction. 5 different prime ministers in 4 years. Foreign investors nervous. Markets jittery. The narrative was one of a country sliding backward. Then came the 2022 general election. And everything changed. For the first time in Malaysian history, no single coalition won a majority. What emerged was a unity government, a genuine, multiracial, multi-party coalition led by Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, a man who had spent years in prison for politically motivated charges and came back to lead his country. The Economist Intelligence Unit tracked what happened next. In 2023, Malaysia's governance score improved by 11 points in a single year, one of the fastest single-year improvements anywhere in Asia. Institutional trust, policy consistency, investor confidence, all moving in the same direction at the same time. Datin Nora is 67. A retired schoolteacher from Kedah who has seen Malaysian politics cycle through every shade of drama over 5 decades. She told her daughter she cried watching the unity government's first full parliament session. Not because of any particular speech, but because for the first time in as long as she could remember, the people in that chamber looked like the Malaysia she had always believed existed. Different faces, different backgrounds, genuinely trying to govern together. "I didn't think I would live to see it," she said. But this new political arrangement works beautifully when the economy is growing. The real test will come when it faces its first major shock. When a recession hits. When a scandal breaks. When regional rivals attempt to destabilize things. That test is coming. The question is whether the unity is deep enough to survive it. For 20 years, Malaysia hemorrhaged talent. Between 2000 and 2020, over 1.7 million skilled Malaysians left. Doctors, engineers, academics, entrepreneurs. The World Bank published these numbers in 2021, and they were damning. But something remarkable has been happening since 2022. They're coming back. Not all of them, but enough to shift the story. Dr. Priya Nair is 42. A cardiologist who left Malaysia at 31 for Melbourne and stayed over a decade. She told herself she'd come back someday. But someday kept getting pushed further away. Then her mother got sick. She took a short locum position in KL and saw a country she no longer recognized. New medical infrastructure. A healthcare reform agenda actually being implemented. Young doctors with a fire she hadn't seen when she left. She extended her stay. Then she canceled her return flight altogether. I kept waiting for Malaysia to be ready for me, she told us. I think I finally realized maybe I needed to be ready for Malaysia. But not everyone is celebrating. Some younger Malaysians who never left, who built careers through the difficult years, feel a resentment beginning to simmer. The returning diaspora often gets the headline contracts, the high-profile positions, the investor attention. The people who stayed feel invisible. That tension is real. And it needs to be addressed before it becomes something worse. Now let's zoom all the way out. Because the most geopolitically fascinating chapter of Malaysia's rise is happening at a level that affects every nation on Earth, and most people have no idea it's playing out. Malaysia is quietly becoming the most important neutral ground between the United States and China. Think about that for a moment. These are the two most powerful nations in human history, locked in a cold economic and technological war. And nestled between their competing spheres of influence sits Malaysia, a country that has deep trade relationships with both, military alliances with neither, and the diplomatic sophistication to play both sides without burning either bridge. In 2023, trade between Malaysia and China exceeded $140 billion. Malaysia-US trade topped $70 billion. Add in the EU, Japan, and South Korea, and you have a country whose economic survival literally depends on keeping every major power at the table. Malaysia has every incentive on earth to remain stable, neutral, and pragmatic. And in 2025, Malaysia chairs ASEAN 10 countries, 680 million people, a combined GDP of over $3.6 trillion. According to UN Comtrade data from 2024, the collective trade volume between Malaysia, China, and the United States exceeded $300 billion in 2023. An almost incomprehensible number for a nation of 33 million people. This is exactly why Beijing courts Kuala Lumpur carefully. Why Washington sends senior envoys. Why European Commission delegations fly in regularly. Malaysia has positioned itself not as a small player begging for attention, but as a critical node in the global economic network that nobody can afford to alienate. But this balancing act is genuinely dangerous. When the US-China rivalry intensifies and every signal suggests it will, neutral ground becomes contested ground. Malaysia will face pressure to choose sides. From Washington on technology standards and chip exports. From Beijing on infrastructure financing and digital systems. The grace period won't last forever. How Malaysia navigates that moment will define its trajectory for the next 50 years. Before we get to the final chapter, drop a comment below with where you're watching from. We want to know how many countries are following this story. And if you haven't shared this video yet, now is the time. Let's talk about the human flood. Literally. In the first 10 months of 2023 alone, 20 million tourists visited Malaysia. Tourism Malaysia projects that by 2026, that number could reach 35 million, figures that would put Malaysia in direct competition with Thailand and Indonesia. Malaysia has something rare, a genuine multicultural tourism experience. In a single city, you can eat Malay nasi lemak for breakfast, Chinese dim sum for lunch, and Indian banana leaf rice for dinner. You can walk from a colonial-era mosque to a Taoist temple to a Hindu shrine in 20 minutes. Borneo's ancient rainforests, the islands of Langkawi and Perhentian, Cameron Highlands, a capital city with one of the most recognizable skylines in Asia. And the prices are still accessible. That combination diversity, beauty, culture, and affordability is almost impossible to find at this scale anywhere else. Tourism Malaysia reported the sector contributed Rm 86.1 billion to GDP in 2023, a 79.4% recovery from pre-pandemic levels. Insik Halim is 55. He owns a small resort on Langkawi 12 chalets, a modest restaurant, a boat for island hopping tours. In 2020 and 2021, he nearly sold it. Tourism had collapsed. Staff had left. He was keeping the place alive on savings and stubbornness. In 2023, he had his best year on record. Not his best post-COVID year. His best year ever. I almost gave up on my own country, he said quietly. I'm glad I didn't. But this tourism explosion is quietly creating a hidden crisis. Malaysia's infrastructure is straining. Roads on popular islands are congested beyond capacity. Coral reef ecosystems are showing serious degradation. Affordable housing for local workers has become nearly impossible. The communities that were supposed to benefit from tourism are being quietly priced out of it. Thailand went through this cycle. Bali went through it. If sustainability planning doesn't keep pace with growth, the same charm attracting millions of visitors could be consumed and destroyed by those very visitors. The government knows this. The question is whether the policy response will come fast enough. So here's where we land. Malaysia is rising. That is not a prediction anymore. It is a documented, measurable, multi-sector reality. The semiconductors, the record investment, the Johor-Singapore economic zone, the political stabilization, the talent returning home, the geopolitical neutrality, the tourism surge, all of it happening simultaneously. All of it compounding. And yet Malaysia is not in your daily news feed. It's happening quietly, almost invisibly, which is exactly what makes it so significant and so worth paying attention to right now, before the rest of the world catches up. By the time economic transformations like this are loud, the early advantages are already gone. The early investors have positioned. The early businesses have established. The early talent has arrived. The window is open right now. But windows don't stay open forever. Malaysia's story is still being written. And the most exciting chapters may not have been lived yet. If you had Rm 50,000 to invest right now, would you bet on Malaysia's next decade? Or are you still skeptical that a country of 33 million can hold its momentum against global uncertainty? Drop your answer in the comments and tell me why. Because the most interesting debate isn't happening in boardrooms, it's happening right here. If this video gave you something to think about, share it with one person who needs to know this story. Not because of an algorithm. Because information like this real, grounded, honest analysis of a country quietly changing the world is exactly the kind of thing that shouldn't stay quiet. Thank you for watching. And I'll see you in the next on.